Let us understand how dynamic forms works within Zeppelin. Within nodes, we can have dynamic input forms like text box, drop down, and checkboxes. Sometimes while doing the analysis within the query, rather than hard coding the value, I can get those values dynamically from the user and customize the query accordingly. So these input forms will help me to get the values either from the text box or from the drop box or from the checkbox. And the scope of the input values that we are capturing, it could be only for that specific paragraph or for the entire notebook. If I am capturing for the entire notebook, wherever I am using that value, it will be applicable. Let us see the examples how to use the input elements for the paragraph scope and for the node scope. Let me create a new notebook. And let us see the simple syntax of how to create a text box, drop down, and checkboxes. I can have a text box within the flower bracket. So whatever the value that I am entering over here, that will be replaced. So this is a input where I am going to capture through a text box. I can give a default value over here as well. So here the default value, and I can change those values. Whatever the one that I want, I can change those values. Now let us see how to use the drop down box. I'll be mentioning that as a status. So here I have a drop down open. So whatever the value that I am selecting, that would get reflected over here. So if I see the code, I'll be giving a name of the element that I'm going to capture as a select. And the name of it is status. And I'm going to give the values open, in progress, and closed. The same way I can use the checkbox. I'm going to mention I'm going to use the checkbox. The name is languages, and these are all the values that I'm going to have, and these are all the values by default it is checked. So I have the Scala and Python already checked and 4 values that I had provided. And I can give the delimiter whenever I'm selecting the value, how the delimiter should be working. I can provide the delimiter while selecting the value as well. So these are all some of the sample examples. Here I'm using the delimiter as, and so it's going to use Scala and Python and Java for big data projects. Now in all the variables, I have used dollar as the variable element. In case if I use it $, then it will be considered as an element scope for the entire notebook. Let me give another example for the same. So I'll be capturing an element at the notebook level. At the notebook level, I'll be having the name. So I'm capturing the name over here. And whenever I want, I can use this particular element. Now I'm going to show a few examples how programmatically using the input elements. Let me create another worksheet. Within Zeppelin, it creates a context to communicate across the paragraph, or to communicate with the Zeppelin, it creates a context, and that is available as Z. I'm going to use an element called a text box. So it will be used or executed along with the Spark executor. I have got the text box. So programmatically, I can represent a text box either using the Spark interpreter or the PySpark interpreter I can use. So this is another example of using it with the PySpark interpreter. I can have a default value for the text box. So here I'm having a default value called sun. Any value I wanted to change, I can change over here. The same way I can represent a Dropbox as well. Let me go ahead and do an example for the Dropbox. Let's see a small example of how to use a Dropbox programmatically. I'm going to use a select option with the Zeppelin context, and the name of the Dropbox value is day, and these are all the options available and the values corresponding to it. So that should provide me a Dropbox, and I can select whatever the value that I want, and the value corresponding to the value I am selecting will be passed as a variable over here. Now I can have the Dropbox at the notebook level as well. So in this case, I am going to create a text box at the paragraph level, and I can have a text box at the notebook level as well. So for the one that notebook level I am using, the text box will be available. So the value that I am entering, that should be available over here whenever I am executing notebook scope. So these are all some of the examples of how to use various input elements, and programmatically I can create an input text box, a drop box, or a checkbox. And whenever I am going to use it at the notebook level, I will be replacing the name as note text box, note select, and note checkbox. Let us see an example how to use these elements programmatically. I'm going to create a small example. I'm going to have a sequence of elements. I'm going to convert that into a data frame within Spark. I'll be registering this as a temporary table, and I'm going to provide a select button over here. So if A means, I'll be selecting the value 1, B means 2, C means 3. So I have the data set. Now I'm going to select the elements A, B or C. Default will be A. So I'll be getting all the records corresponding to A. If I select B, I'll be getting all the records corresponding to B. See, I should not be having any records. So it's going to give me an input channel so that I can change the value and visualize how the results going to look like. Most of the time we will be using this input element as a part of the group column or the where conditions I'll be using, so that I don't need to execute the statement once again. I can use this particular input element to change the values. Let us see some practical way of using the input elements. I have the MySQL interpreter and I have the MySQL database running. I have a database called Sakila. I'm going to use this specific database and use a query. Let me use this specific database with MySQL interpreter, and I'm going to use a query. I'm going to select the category name, the average length of the movie, and I'm going to group all the results based on the category. And I'm going to arrange the elements based on the descending order. Here I have provided arrange by as descending, and I will have both the options ascending and descending. So it's going to get arranged by the default value of descending, and it will provide me a drop box as well. And since I have provided the drop box as a node scope, it will be available at the notebook level. I have the default value descending, and so the average length is arranged based on the descending order. In case if I want in the ascending order, I can change it. Automatically it will get refreshed to the ascending order. So this is one example where I can provide the elements that I am going to change based on the user input. Here is another example. Here I am doing the order based on the total. I can change the values however the way I want. In case if I want this particular element to be effective across the node, then I can create the variable at the notebook level using $$ symbol. Then it would get created at the notebook level. I can use the same element across the queries, across all the paragraph, and take that effect.